we saw a bunch of stories come out, yesterday and a little bit last week, and that kind of that echoed a sentiment I think a lot of college football fans had been kind of that we'd gotten hints of and had been kind of leaning in the direction of, is that basically after next season, the Big Ten and the SEC assume control of the college football playoff, which that's a whole other thing. But it's happening. That's the world we're going to live in. It's happening. Those two conferences are going to control the playoff. And the thought is, the reports are that both conferences are very interested in pushing towards a 14 or 16 team conference. I would think if they're going to expand, they're just going to go to 16 teams and get more games, more TV money and things like that. I would assume that's I know they're entertaining a 14 team, but it seems like if you're going to expand, just go to the full 16 team bracket and call it a day. I don't know. The thought too is that the conferences would get a number of auto bids. I think the one article I read said up to 4 per 4 auto bids each for the Big Ten and the SEC, which feels like a lot. But this is the Big Ten and the SEC flexing their muscles essentially, and just saying this, we're going to do this our way or the highway type of thing. I guess what are your initial thoughts on the expansion there? And we can kind of talk about it, because obviously then I was saying the Big 12 and the ACC and all that have this is a lot of moving parts for them too.
For me, the issues are, number one, depending on where that number lands, what do we do with conference championships, and do they matter in this? If we get to 16 and then nobody's got buys, do the conference championship games matter? Is that almost a penalty? If you're just going to give a first round bye to the conference or the first round playoff game, home playoff game, it doesn't really matter.
No.
So that's an issue I have with it. But getting back to your original point about the power move being made by the SEC and the Big Ten, I hate it. I cannot communicate how fervently I hate it, because I don't think either one of us would be that flabbergasted if 4 SEC/Big Ten teams earned their way into a 14, and I mean legitimately earned their way into a 14 or 16 team playoff. I have no issue with that.
No.
But they want the best of both worlds. And I saw this coming, and I'm not saying I was the only one. Tony Petitti, when this started to get shaken up a little bit, and even before the SEC and the Big Ten made this alliance, when he first took over the league from Kevin Warren, he made a comment and he said, we're going to make sure that Big Ten football is as entertaining as can be, meaning we're going to play the best brands. They're going to play each other more often in late October and November. But we're also going to ensure that we get the most playoff teams that the Big Ten can possibly get in. And my initial reaction was obviously, well, that's counterproductive. No, you can't do both.
Right.
Well, then it only took me a few seconds to think, well, that's a loaded statement. So they're going to do something to ensure just that. So they want both. They want to put the best brands on the field in the Big Ten and the SEC and weight down their records and say, we're fine with that. We have 8 and 4 teams, fine, because they're still going to make the playoffs because we got auto bids. Well, I want, if we're going to have a committee, Levi, and we're going to trust that committee, and I'm not fully sold on the committee, but I think they've done a decent job. But if we're going to entrust this committee, select the 16 teams that earned it. And if the Big Ten and the SEC are as good as they think they are, they will definitely not get shut out. If they're
not going to get shut out. That's the fascinating part about these 4 auto bids for them, is like, are they under this belief that anyone's not giving the Big Ten and the SEC the benefit of the doubt?
Exactly. And
who are we pretending that they're not getting that?
And I would be more in favor of it, although I would not even agree with this. Would it be 4 auto bids and no more? You're going to get 4.
And that's just it. You just get 4 every year, period. Yeah.
No, of course, that's not going to be
That's not how it works.
They might get 5.
Yeah. I'm sure the SEC would get their auto 4 and then say, well, what about 5 and 6? The 6th best team beat the 2nd best team. They should be in, and they're 9 and 3, whatever. And honestly, the SEC perturbs me even more on this than the Big Ten, because the Big Ten plays 9 conference games. You know who doesn't play 9 conference games? The SEC. So Yes, because the entire reason the SEC is like, we don't want to play 9 games. Our conference is too good. They shouldn't have to play such a difficult schedule. Buddy, I don't know how to tell you this. Everybody else plays non-conference games, including the Big Ten. The Big Ten also plays 9 conference games. So the SEC, it really annoys me because they'll only go to 9 conference games if they can get 4 teams guaranteed into the playoff. But like, you going to a 9th conference game, like Georgia eating one more loss and going to 10-2 or 9-3 on a regular basis is not going to keep them out of the playoff. Yeah. A 9-3 Georgia team is probably going to be in even at a back end seed most years. You're going to, even if you played 9 conference games, you're still going to have your 4 best teams are going to be in, and you're going to you might have another 1 or 2. Like, that's what perturbs me about this, is that the SEC is just straight up not playing on a level playing field with everybody else in terms of the schedule they have to go through. Because it's not like they're replacing that 9th. They're not replacing that 9th game with a team that would be in the middle of the SEC. They're playing.
A few teams are. A few teams on occasion.
Well,
on occasion.
Alabama will go to play somebody in Jerry World, but like.
Well, I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about a second game, like a South Carolina, like a. Trying to think who they played. South Carolina always plays Clemson, but if they pick up somebody else, like Georgia plays Georgia Tech.
Sure.
Always, and then they play Clemson last year. So they played 2
sure.
Power Fives.
Sure. So like
that's not the rule. That's the exception.
That's the exception to the rule. Yes. That's the exception that proves the rule, is that most of the SEC they're not replacing that 9th conference game with a middle of the road SEC team. They're replacing it with Georgia State or Jacksonville State. Like they're playing some team that just, they might even be a decent for the division they're in, but they're just going to get run over. To me, the 16-team playoff becomes a lot more palatable for the small conferences, for Big 12, and I shouldn't say small conferences, but for the Big 12 and the ACC that are not controlling the playoff. You feel fine about that expansion, I think, as long as you get an auto bid for that conference. Not, it's not, the best however many champions, and then the ACC and Big 12 kind of have a shoe in there, but, could theoretically get left out in case there's a weird American team or something like that. Like, you need, if you come out of that saying the Big 12 and the ACC have a guaranteed spot for each conference in that playoff, and then whatever else happens after that, I think you can be okay with it. You don't like it because it's very clear that the ACC or that the SEC and the Big 10 have essentially created a duopoly in college football, which frankly there needs to be, at that point there probably should be antitrust investigations done as far as collusion and things like that. But that's a whole other legal constitutional thing. But, I'm a little worried for the future of college football, because I think that the people in charge and making decisions have basically zero interest or have zero knowledge on what makes college football fundamentally appealing to the average person. I don't think they have any understanding of how that is. They see it as a business, which I guess, sure, that's their job to see it as a business. So from that perspective, I guess I can't blame them, because they're concerned about they're concerned about the bottom of the number at the bottom of the cash flow chart at the end of the year. But so I get it, but it also, I don't think they understand how that number exactly ends up that way. I mean, and that's pervasive across many industries, where the people making decisions just don't understand what makes their product attractive to the consumer. But, I specifically think college football execs and conference commissioners and stuff like that, I wouldn't go so far to say that they actively don't like the current college football model, or they actively hate college football. I don't think that's true. But I think they fundamentally misunderstand what makes college football what it is. College football is, the money says college football is about the big brands getting on TV and selling lots of selling $1 million 30-second ads to Pepsi. That's what they think college football is that's what the money says college football is. But if you talk to the average normie fan, college football is about Thursday night watching Ohio and Toledo going to quadruple overtime, in November, and the winner goes to the MAC title game, and then watching, staying up late on a Saturday to watch BYU and Utah beat the shit out of each other in the Holy War,
absolutely.
Stuff like that. That's what the normie feels college football is.
And beyond that, Levi, just to extend on your point, I get it too. They're looking at a ledger, and I'm doing a series right now, as I do every off season. I'll go through every conference and go through the TV ratings. And basically, if you look at the top 10 games, there's about 30 games that get rated by the networks every week. And if you look at the top 10, it's flooded with the Big Ten and the SEC. That's no, aside from the phenomenon, let me spit that out, that is Deion Sanders. That's very,
it's an aberration.
That's crazy.
Is what it
that's
is.
crazy,
Yeah.
but it's an aberration. But it's basically about the 8th highest rated game each week shows up as a Big 12 game, somewhere in that range. So I get the business side of it, but to your point, the guy that roots for Kansas State, who is a big college football fan, but first and foremost, it's about Kansas State and the Big 12. He feels some kind of connection to, if he's got time in his day, to check out the Ohio State Wisconsin game or the Georgia Florida game, because he feels as though we're all in this together and there is connection.
Right.
And everything that's been decided by these major conferences in the past when it comes to any kind of money, contractual agreements from bowls, has been split in the past. It's always just been, we split everything.
Mhm.
And now suddenly the Big Ten, no, we get 29% and you guys get 13%. And that's the first time, when I heard Brett Yormark, and I know he's got to be a salesman and put on a grin and say everything's great with the world. But for him to say in the last 6 months that, at no other time has if things been so equitable and so fair, and we're in this all together, and it's like, no,
we're not. I mean,
that's not the case.
I mean, yeah, he's got to say what he's got to say, but like nobody is under the impression that we're all in this together. The Big Ten and the SEC are in it for those two, and that's about it. And they're just kind of whatever. But It's interesting though, because it seems like the conferences do understand that while they can threaten to break away and do their own thing, I think it seems to me like they realize that they really can't, because otherwise they would have done it. They would have just done it. You would just say after the 25 season, the SEC and the Big Ten are going to go be the NFL developmental league, and that's just what we're going to be, or whatever. They could have already done that. Nobody is stopping them from doing that, except for the fact that they know that they can't do that. That's just not how it works. That's not, when you take this chunk of college football off and this chunk of college football off, the college football normies are still going to watch the Big 12 ACC G5 version of college football, because that's college football. That's the part of college football that I think a lot of people say this is really what the sport kind of is supposed to be, or whatever. It's parody, it's fun games with guys that you've never even heard of that are just out there just playing football because they love playing football or whatever. And I think a lot of people see the SEC and the Big Ten as like this pseudo, it's a TV product. There's a lot of times where it just doesn't feel like college football because it feels like such a corporatized version of the game. So, I think personally, I think people will still watch it, obviously, but like lots of people are still going to watch it, but I think it loses a lot of its allure as a college football product if you were to do that. And I think the SEC and the Big Ten understand that.
I think they do too. There is no way that they're going to, even though I hear these crazy comments every so often from somebody in my chat that says, I just want to watch the SEC and the Big Ten. Yeah, those people in the minority. The powers that be understand that they are not galvanizing their fan bases anymore by separating, but they are cutting off the Midwest, the middle part of the country, to basically say, we're not watching the SEC and the Big Ten play anymore, and they don't want to do that.
No, they don't want to, but I think there are enough people that if that happened and it felt like the Big Ten and the SEC were intentionally just cutting off the legs of the Big 12, the ACC, I think there's a lot of people that would feel a tremendous amount of resentment towards that and say, "That I'm not watching any of that."
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't believe that. I believe, like you, that the Big Ten and the SEC at least have enough brains to understand that they can't cut off.
You just can't do it.
Whatever, 40% of America.
Yeah, and that's why at some point this is kind of a big game of chicken. At some point, I think someone's gonna have their bluff called, and I think right now the rest of college football has more leverage than the Big Ten and the SEC would like to admit that they do, because the SEC, the Big Ten have the eyeballs, they have the attention of SEC and whatever else. Actually, one point I wanted to bring up earlier when you're talking about the TV ratings too is one big factor in that also is that the Big Ten and the SEC get put on CBS, ABC, and
It
stuff like that.
is.
They get put on the main line.
Yes.
When Iowa State and Kansas State get put on CBS or on the big channel, ESPN or whatever, they hold their own. I mean, they're not getting
Yeah.
10 million, but they're getting 5 million
Yeah.
or whatever. When you put,
No, it's a great point.
when you put teams on premier networks, they're gonna get more eyeballs. That's just how
Yes.
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in that you say
Absolutely.
we put the big teams on the big networks, so the big teams get the big eyeballs. Well, yeah, because you put them on the big networks that are on cable that anybody with a basic cable package can get. It's if you have the most basic YouTube TV package, you can watch any SEC game you want. But
Yes.
when you're on Pac-12, when you're on the Big 12 After Dark, we used to be Pac-12 After Dark, now Big 12 After Dark or whatever, and it's and it's BYU and Arizona State on ESPN Plus, which this year was an amazing game. BYU and Arizona State is a top, this year was a top 15 game. It was an amazing football game, that any college football fan should want to watch. Now, granted, the time zone's a little bit of a barrier there just because it's just later and it just is what it is. But when you put that on ESPNU or on ESPN Plus or whatever, yeah, fewer people are gonna watch it. That's how it works. When you put South Carolina and Mississippi State on CBS on the main CBS channel, but then you take a top 10 matchup between Arizona State and Iowa State and put that on FS1 or on ESPN Plus or something like that. Yeah, they're gonna have less eyeballs.
Yeah,
that's just how it's. The number of self-fulfilling prophecies required to keep this apparatus going is just drives me nuts.
but to be fair, those games are still going to get more. But you are
for sure.
You're completely right. There are people out there that just know, they're not in it Monday through Friday like we are and looking at rosters and everything. I'm watching college football on Saturday night and I flip on ABC because that's what I do. Yeah. I just watch the ABC game. And so if I'm getting fed Georgia and Florida or Alabama and Ole Miss, that's what I'm watching. Right. And if somebody decided to feed me Arizona State and Iowa State, I'd watch that too. Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. The time frame, the time window, and the network has a lot to do with the TV ratings.
It's huge impact. I mean, no one's going to pretend that if all other circumstances are equal, that Iowa State's going to outdraw Texas on TV. No one's pretending that's going to happen. But yeah, it's easy to say,
I was closer.
It would be much closer. If you put Texas on ESPN Plus and you put Iowa State on ABC or on CBS, they're going to get good.
I would love to, if we could only run an alternate universe to see, let's put the Ohio State Michigan.
We'll never get to find that out
and see how many people watch it. Which people would still find it, but not as many people.
You wouldn't be channel surfing and be like, oh, there's that game. Like you'd have to go seek it out. Now, lots of people would still do that, but the gap would close.
Absolutely.
Oh, the gap would close a lot more than I think TV execs would like to have or have you admit.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. Like I said, I think the 16-team playoff has a number of problems beyond just the they have too many teams and it's where the playoff is boring because it's all SEC and Big Ten and then you just got a couple random teams in there, so it's not quite as interesting as it could be. It's the two conferences inexplicably have control of the entire thing of college football that has massive problems as far as like I said, kind of almost a duopoly on the game. And there's so many issues that goes there, but specific for Iowa State, how it affects Iowa State, I think the path is still the same, is that win the conference, you're in. If you have a really good season, if you're 11-1 or 12-0 and you are a runner-up, you still got a decent shot at getting in. And that's just what it is. I don't think the path really changes for a team like Iowa State very much, but it'll still be frustrating when, you beat Iowa and Kinnick and, Iowa State goes 11-1 and, is a runner-up for a Big 12 title, but then Iowa goes 8-4 and somehow sneaks into the playoff. That'll be frustrating, but it is what it is.